today's episode, we are going to look at Mr. Mark Poner's new house still under construction. Mark is an experienced building designer and an expert in high-performance building material. Let's look at how an expert is dealing with his new build house. And Mark, what are you going to achieve for this house?
Mezzy and I looked to renovate a house, and I could never be comfortable renovating because how do I get the thermal performance right? I've got to pull everything apart, and so found ourselves a block of land. We're building our final home, and I have to build it energy efficiency because that's in my bloodstream, the energy efficiency and the environmental impact of our buildings. And we're up on a hill, I'm facing the southeast. It's not a great, solar outlook. I'm going to get all the cold and wintry weather as we're getting at the moment. It's incredibly cold this winter in Melbourne.
Yep.
So it's making perfect sense that I've wrapped the outside vapor permeable fabrics. All my walls are double stud, so I'm double insulating the house. I've got an internal wrap, so I've got my air barrier, vapor barrier internally, and I've left myself that services zone for all my electrical and plumbing. So I'm following passive house principles. I'm hoping to get it really airtight. That's really important because we cop a lot of wind on the side of this hill and I'm facing the worst of the weather. Yep. So I'm sort of vaguely modelling it on a sort of European housing where it's fairly rectangular and simple to try and insulate and wrap. And I'm aiming to get it down to, well, let's call it 0.6, but I don't think. But we'll do our best. We'll do our best. If I can, I know I've got to get it to 2 or 3, and then anything below that would be fantastic. So, and I'd love to get it to 0.6 of an air change.
Excellent. Let's go in and see how we go. And let's see how a conventional builder with good instructions and extra care can bring a house down to. Let's do it.
All right.
Let's do it.
Right now we're doing some troubleshooting on this lovely home, finding where all the little things can leak that add up to quite a lot.
Joseph, you want to put the fan on? We want to hunt out all these little leaks. I want to see what's going on. I want this house to be really airtight. Okay, and you're sucking air or blowing air?
Sucking at the moment.
Sucking?
So you will feel air coming in.
Okay.
So the wrap is blowing
in. I reckon there's possibly a little leak. Can you feel anything? Can you feel anything along there?
Yeah, it's definitely happening around this window.
So there's a little bit of a...
In the very corners.
Gee, it's amazing how the wrap, billows out, isn't it?
It is,
It really puts a pressure.
So we're simulating around, what are we at, Joseph? 50 pascals? So we're simulating 32 kilometre winds on all your facades.
Yeah. Well, we've already identified a leak here.
Yeah.
And that's purely because I can remember my wraps come in from both sides.
Yeah. Wow.
See that?
Yeah.
My wraps coming from both sides and I haven't quite taped to the corner. So somewhere in behind here there's a leak. So
it's amazing, isn't it? Attention to detail. I wonder what it's doing up in the corner.
So.
Hey? Oh wow. I think it's even bigger up there.
Yeah. Right? That'll be one of the junctions of the house where I don't have this gasket detail. Where I've used a 300mm wide damp-proof course. And every internal wall that meets an external has the damp-proof course up first, and then we've taped to that. Yep. And this corner doesn't have it. So that just goes to show you the one corner that I've missed a sort of a gasket detail. Yeah. I've got a leak all the way down.
Are you able to fix this, do you reckon?
I'm going to pull it apart.
Oh,
no, I'm going to take the batten off. I'm going to pull it apart, and we'll just have a really good go at. It's amazing, the air pressure test. When I see the wrap billowing out like this, you do not realise how much pressure. Yeah. I never imagined it. So we're taping, we're sealing, and I'm not imagining how sort of extreme the wind is that you're applying to the house. Yeah. Yeah. So you're sucking, but then you're going to blow as well, and all this is going to go in.
Go the other way. Yep.
So we've got to check it out and see what the air tightness is like in both directions.
Totally.
We're at 1.8.
Yep.
So we started off at 2. We fixed one little leak, and I reckon we dropped to 1.9. Yeah. We fixed another little leak, and we've dropped to 1.8. Every time we find a leak, we tend to pull it down by about 0.1, hey? What do you think? What do you reckon? All we've got to do is find 20 leaks and I'll be airtight.
I guess that's the big thing, right? It can either be one big hole or a lot of little holes. And And I guess that's the most dangerous when it comes to trying to reducing your leakage rate.
See, this is my gasket detail here with this damp-proof course went on the external wall first. The internal wall went in, and then I've taped to it.
Yeah.
And I reckon where we've got that gasket, it's performing pretty well.
Yeah, yeah.
But I've missed the gasket on that front corner.
Yeah.
And we're probably getting a little bit of air through the foam filling around the windows.
That needs to be.
Oh, there's one here. And you see where the foam's a little bit lean too, where there's a little bit of a gap in the foam.
Yeah.
You can feel it coming through your fingers, can't you? So, and then you put your, let's see what happens. Oh, it's not obvious, but you can actually feel it though.
Yeah.
You get really good at feeling wind, don't you?
You do. When you're doing it all the time.
So.
Yep. Well, if you're not doing it all the time, the other trick is get your hands slightly wet.
Yeah.
Yep. A little bit of water on it.
And we've put a lot of effort into taping this house up. A lot of effort. It just goes to show you 2 or 3 little areas, because you actually get a little bit sort of lazy, you know, a little bit tired.
It's a lot of work putting in this wrap that you put in.
It's another great gasket of mine here that goes around the corner. That I reckon these gaskets actually the gaskets are working really well actually. So I'm pretty happy with that.
Let's have a look at the top.
You're going to prove me wrong or something. Look at
That
that.
one's pretty good.
No movement at all.
Yep.
That's it.
So can you talk to us a little bit about this detail that you put with your false ceiling to accommodate the wrap?
Okay, so we've wrapped the ceiling, and just because it's really hard to get your wrap nice and tight into the corners, I'm going to say I just went down the hardware store and Bunnings basically and picked up a plastic plaster X mould, external plaster mould that a plaster installer would use, and we just use that to really tighten up the corners.
Yeah.
So, you know, we wrapped, we taped, we've put that in place. So I think this is a great idea because I reckon it just tightens up in the internal corners, the external corners, and look, I bought about 50 lengths of it. It's cheap, $3 or something, you know, and we just rattled it around everywhere.
But conventionally, you know, I mean, a lot of the stick-built homes, the airtight barrier is the plaster. Yeah, so you've put an air barrier behind that.
Sure.
And you've got an airtightness and insulation barrier behind the plaster, and you've got a cavity.
Yeah.
What are you putting in that cavity as well?
Okay, so the idea obviously, as you know, Johnny, to wrap the air tightness, you wrap the walls and the ceiling and you get the whole outer envelope airtight. And then I've dropped the ceiling down. I've got to run a ventilation system. So I'm pumping fresh air into all the living and sucking the stale air out through bathrooms and laundries. So I've dropped the ceiling down 6 inches so that I've got that cavity for my ventilation system. So it just makes it, you just run it anywhere. Sometimes you build bulkheads in and I couldn't quite make that work. So I just dropped the whole ceiling down. So I stuck the roof up a little high to drop the ceiling down. So, I mean, I think it's the only way to go.
I reckon too.
The only way to go. Because bulkheads become just too complicated in my head. I couldn't make it work.
No.
So the whole ceiling, and then my light fittings simply go into this recess. So what you've really got is a services cavity. You've got this fantastic ceiling services cavity for the ventilation, the light fittings, the electrical, everything you want to put in. And it's all below the wrap. I've got a double layer of insulation above, so I've put one layer between the bottom cord and then the second layer over the top in the opposite direction to knock out all my sort of what I'm calling thermal bridging created by roof trusses. And that, I thought that'd be really hard to install, but that was easy. I didn't have any problem at all doing that. I thought the ceiling wrap would be really hard to install as well because you're working above your head. But funny enough, my son did it. And he knocked it on the head in a couple of days, you know, working 3 or 4 hours after work. And he just rattled it through. So
what a champion.
Now, the wall wrap is the more difficult because of all the window openings. So my partner, Mezzy, did all the wall wrapping and I must admit, the wall wrap is a bigger job, I think, than the ceiling wrap, even though I never did it. I'm just watching them saying, I think it's a bigger job. So, and I thought the ceiling would be much harder.
Amazing.
So the wrapping, you know, it's time consuming,
but I think
it's not difficult.
You did it really well too because you've been able to put the wrap directly above all of your walls.
Yes. I'd seen houses before where they left all the internal walls out, but in my head I couldn't handle the whole idea of having a house that is not braced by the internal walls. So I just assumed I was going to run it across the top. And that's exactly what happened. It just took two of us to draw it across each wall, another person, Mezzy at the other end, unrolling the roll, and we just brought it through easy.
Cool.
So I was really impressed by wrapping the roof was simple in a way. The walls is more time consuming. And it's all come together pretty nicely.
Yeah, it has.
So
now you've also built another home a little while ago, right?
Okay, so in my past life I was a building designer for 20 years. So anyway, look, 12 or so years ago I built a house just around the corner here.
Yes.
And I thought I got it. At the time, it's double glazed, it's well insulated. I wrapped the outside, I taped the outside. No internal wrap, obviously. I didn't know about passive house approach at that stage. And it's been a really comfortable home. So when I've built this home 10 years later, and my passion is all about insulation and thermal performance and the environment. So this one I started off saying, okay, I'll wrap it. Once you get started, you can't help yourself. You just sort of go a little bit out of control, and you try to look at every detail. Even though we've missed a few, you do try to do it really well.
So, and you've done a pretty good job here. We're sitting at around about 1.7 at the moment, which I'm sure this weekend we'll try and tighten up even further.
What's good though is every time we find a leak, we actually drop it down by about 0.1. So every time we find a leak, and we get a bit of tape out, we get a bit of mastic out.
Well, it looks like Joseph's just found.
He finds another one.
Yeah.
Joseph. But every time we find a leak, that's great, because every time we find a leak,
it comes
that
down.
0.1. So I reckon after this weekend we'll have it right down.
That's what we want to do. We might do a follow-up video on that. So Mark, we're about to run the air tightness test, yeah?
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm beside myself. I'm beside myself. I don't really. Go on.
Don't get too excited, right?
No.
Joseph's just running the baseline, and then shortly we'll induce
the baseline,
the pressure points.
Well, as
now,
I said,
while we're waiting for that, talk to us about this wall detail.
Yeah, okay, so the whole house has sort of got the double layer of insulation in it. We've got the internal services zone for our electrical and plumbing, so we've kept all of that out of the main insulation zone. Outside is wrapped in the Bradford Enviro Seal wraps, the vapor permeable, and then inside we've got the Proctor Smart Vap, which is a vapor barrier, of course. And anyway, it's a great little product because it's transparent, so you can see what's behind the wall when you're working. You're taping it and fixing it. It's little things like gridding it so you can cut it to length really easily, and it's flexible too. So like a lot of wraps, you run them and you start to get a bit skew-if, and when you straighten it up again, it folds and creases. This has a bit of flexibility in it too. So it's light, it's easy to tape. It's actually worked really well. I must admit, I think it's a great product.
Yeah, it is.
And then we tape it, of course. The tape sticks because it's a bit of a smooth surface. The tape you use sticks
really well.
Even though they've got a new tape. You've told me. They've got the white tape now, which is better than the green tape. But still, I had no problems with working it.
And then you've battened it out, right?
Yep.
We're not touching your air tightness barrier.
No,
which is super important.
Electrical and plumbing. So I've educated the electrician and the plumber, and they're all on board. They're pretty excited as well. So the back half of the house here is battened, and I'll be putting another layer of insulation in here. A little 40mm R1 glass wool batting there. The main living room is double stud wall, so I've got two 90mm studs. So I'm doing R25, R25, R5. This is a R4 combination of insulations. The ceiling's got two layers of insulation. It's sort of R6.
So what are you going to do if you want to run a new service somewhere, if you've stuck insulation in there?
It's like any house. How do you get into an existing wall? It all has to be thought through and resolved up front when you're building a new house.
Right, okay.
And we think about it all day long, mate. It's every morning we work through all the little details of getting this house airtight, insulated, services sorted out. So it's an interesting exercise.
It is.
It is, isn't it?
Go. All right, go.
Joseph.
Show us.
Push the button.
Wow.
So, what's happening?
We're at 75 pascals right now.
That's too much.
Should be right, mate.
It's too much. Too much air, isn't it?
No, 75.
Usually we do between 75 and 25. So you got a broad range covering 50 in the middle.
Okay. I'm working with you.
Passive house requires 75 pascal anyway.
That's a huge win. You know?
What do you mean?
Well, if 50 pascals is 32, what's 75 pascals?
Less than 50.
Kilometre an hour
you
wind.
still can have that
Yeah.
speed of wind quite often.
Yep.
It's not like gale force 90, 100 kilometers.
But it's not for that though. It's more for the accuracy of
Yep.
the 50 pascal leakage rate.
Yep.
That you've
Okay.
got leakage rates above 50 pascal, not just below.
Rightio. So what's it telling us, Joseph?
We need to do 6 pressure points at least, so you get an extrapolated performance on different pressure point.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, and it will give you a pressure flow equation on different pressure level. So you can pretty much, from that equation, you can extrapolate how much it leaks when the weather is still
Yes, okay.
up to gale force wind.
Right.
Yep.
So you're going to tell me all that? You're going to let me know what the leakage rate is on a night? Well, typically your days are not blowing a gale. And,
Yep.
You're quite high up here though.
I know, and this is why I built this house really keeping the insulation, the airtightness in mind, because I'm facing southwest, I'm elevated, I've got a view across Melbourne, Dandenong, so I actually see all the weather coming at me from 100 kilometres away. And so we've constantly watched the weather coming at us. So, and it's been cold, and it's been a wet, windy, cold winter.
Remember that day we tried to come here to do this?
Unbelievable. I know.
And I was running around with insulation stuck to my head.
I know.
I forgot my beanie.
So,
I almost died that day. Joseph, where are we at the moment?
On negative, we got 1.65 air changes.
Yep.
On positive, 1.82.
Wow.
So on average, the house is performing 1.74.
1.74.
1.74
Wow.
ACH at 50 pascal.
Am I going to be happy with that?
It depends on you, really.
Yeah, I thought that's
you?
probably what I'd get actually. I reckon if I got
Wow.
a below 3, but the way we've wrapped it and the effort, I thought, okay, below 2. I'm aiming for 1,
Yeah. Okay.
but we're going to do some extra work
Absolutely, we are.
and we're going to get it down below 1,
Sure.
aim for 0.6,
Yep.
see how we go.
Totally.
It's very likely you can get down to under 1 because you still got a
it's-
section of wall hasn't been finished.
I know.
Yep, and some other door seal and not adjusted. So it's very likely you can get under
I
1,
reckon we
but
can get to
0.6.
1.
Mm.
Oof,
0.6 is
that's going to be
is
tricky.
always tough.
Yep.
That's going to be tricky, isn't it?
Yep.
Okay, well, I'm pretty happy because if I got anywhere near 0.6, it'd be a miracle. But because it's a big
Yep.
house, it's not a little.
But that makes it easier for an ACH rate to get 0.6. The bigger the house, the easier it is.
Be easier.
The surface to volume ratio,
Ah,
is lower if you got a double-story bigger house.
okay, okay. I reckon I'm pretty happy with that first test,
Totally.
and we'll do some extra work and we'll test it again.
Yep.
Good stuff.
We wanted to today as well do a comparison of this home to a previous build of yours.
Yes.
So it'll be interesting to see the
Yep.
contrast difference.
Well,
and with the
yeah.
amount of love that you've put into this place back
Yeah.
then, with what you knew back then.
I know.
and
I
see
know.
what
It'll
the
be
difference
interesting
is.
to see.
So we'll do that.
I thought my existing house, it's 10 or 12 years old now, I think is reasonably airtight.
Yeah.
But having just experienced this, I'm
Yes.
going to say, what's the chance it'll leak like a sieve?
What do you think it's going to get?
Oh, I don't know. Look, no. Look, if it gets 10, I'd be laughing.
Yeah.
I'd say it's reasonably airtight compared to the average home that probably leaks 15 to 20 air changes. If it leaks 10, I'm probably starting to
find
think
out.
that's where it might sit.
Okay.
I thought it was better than that though.
Yeah,
But having experienced this morning, I'm going to tell you, God. Anyway,
All
it's
right.
amazing.
All right, let's head over to Mark's older home.
Yep.
That was built back in the 80s.
No, it wasn't. It was built 12 years ago, you idiot.
Let's go to Mark's older home that was built around about 12 years ago. So Mark, here we are.
We are.
We've made it.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to tell us a little bit about this place?
Well, this is a house that I built 12 years ago. So, and I thought at the time I insulated it reasonably well, not in today's standard, but to death in those days.
Yep.
With a roof blanket, ceiling, walls. I wrapped it actually in Tyvek back then.
Okay.
So it was the full 2.7 metre roll, taped up around all the windows. Did a reasonably good job, so I was pretty proud of myself.
Yeah.
Because what I've learned in 10 years is that you know, maybe it's not going to stand up to today's
Mate.
sort of standards. But anyway, so this will be interesting to put a blower door test on it. And I would have thought it was reasonably airtight because as the weather changes, we're quite comfortable. We don't get really high and low fluctuations in the internal temperature.
Yep.
Hot and cold. So I would have thought it was reasonably, but having had a little bit of a play out at the new house, this is going to leak like a sieve.
Maybe.
So we'll find out.
All right, done. Let's go. So Mark, tell us a little bit about this place now that we're in here.
Well, as I said, we insulated and wrapped it, but I must admit, from what I've learnt with your blower door testing so far, I've got ducted heating in the floor, leak like a sieve.
That will leak.
I've got exhaust fans in bathrooms and laundries. There's
No draft stoppers.
no draft stoppers.
No draft stoppers.
Leak like a sieve.
Wow.
Kitchen exhaust hood, leak like a sieve. Sliding doors,
Internal cavity.
leak like a sieve.
Do you reckon?
I reckon.
Well, we have to find out.
I know. So
But they could.
I've got a whole heap of things that are going to leak like a sieve.
Okay.
So let's have a crack.
All right,
let's see
let's
what
do
it
it.
does.
So Mark, let's have a look at these internal cavity sliders. This is a favourite of mine. Wow.
Unbelievable. Look at that.
It's moving a lot of air.
You can feel it just blowing you in the face here.
Ooh. You need draft stoppers here big time.
Without a draft stopper, it's a joke, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So Polnar, around about a 12.
12, yeah.
What are your thoughts on that and what have you learnt?
Okay, so from what I've learned over the last couple of weeks, 12 was probably expected, but what we've learnt is that this house has double glazed. Now the windows and doors are really quite airtight. We didn't find any leaks. My light fittings are really quite airtight as well.
Yeah, they are.
I expected those to leak. What leaked is my sliding door units. There's 3
internal cavity sliders.
Disaster. I've got 3 exhaust fans up into the ceiling space, leak absolutely like a sieve, of course, no draft stoppers.
Yep.
So if we got 12, so if I was to somehow, which I can't, but if I was to somehow stop those leaks, and there's 6 dramatic leaks, funny enough, I'd be down to where I should be at probably about 6 air changes.
Yeah, correct.
Because what we notice about this house, that it can get cold, but long as it's not windy. If it gets cold, it's still like today, the house stays really warm, it stays consistent, but as soon as the wind blows, that house obviously leaks like a sieve and gets cold in winter.
But you know, it's pretty rare. Your home is really well insulated. A lot of the homes in Australia aren't very well insulated. But the only thing that's sort of letting you down is your air tightness.
So it's well insulated, well wrapped, but there's 6 fatal flaws in the house, isn't there?
There are.
That are actually destroying its energy efficiency in cold, windy and hot, windy weather.
Yeah, and we
That's
get
it.
a bit of that.
We do.
Okay, Mark, let's go back to your new home. It's currently at 1.8.
Yep.
On this next episode, we're going to try and get it down to under 0.6.